I'm Elizabeth and I'm here to talk about books. Today I'm basically here to show you some books, because a few days ago 5 lovely booktubers announced Sagalong, which is a readathon taking place in the month of February, where they are going to be reading Sagas. One saga a week and then a video about the text of the week every Sunday. I will of course leave links to all of the 5 organizing this down below. They are Crystal from BiblioAtlas, Mark from Richardson's Reads, Lucas from Totally Pretentious, Elena from Elena Makridina, and Steve from Donoghue. So please take a look at their announcement videos if this sounds interesting to you. I got very excited about this project because these texts are something that is very near and dear to me. When I was, I think, 13, 14, my early teens at least, I got very invested in all things Old Norse, or all things Viking related, really. It started with me reading a bit of historical fiction set in the Viking Age, particularly around the time where Christianity first came to Norway, and you had all these conflicts between the old gods and Christianity, and about people following either way of believing. People being close to the old traditions and the people wanting to embrace the new. And so I read a fair bit of historical fiction set in this era, and then at one point I wanted to know more about what the actual facts, and I started looking up non-fiction books about the topic. I scoured my local library for anything I could find about this era. And then, after having read a fair bit of non-fiction as well, I started to be interested in the source material. I haven't been reading a lot of this lately, which is why this read-along excited me so much. It made me take things out of my shelves that have been collecting dust from some years. And this is one read-along where I could find everything I needed in my own shelves. So I thought today I just wanted to show you the editions that I will be reading. And I will be reading all of this in Norwegian, because this is one kind of literature I don't want to read in English, really. I don't know why. I mean, it is translated into Norwegian as well. It was originally written in Old Norse, and even though I've done a course in Old Norse at university and I have sort of spelled my way through snippets of these texts in the original, I'm not capable of reading it in any way I will be able to enjoy it in Old Norse. But somehow Norwegian still feels a bit closer than English. So for the first week, the saga is the Saga of Eric the Red, which is the only one of these 4 texts that I have not already read. However, I have read a lot about Eric the Red, and I know he was one of the original colonizers of Greenland, so I assume that's going to be a big part of that saga. And then the second week, it's the Saga of Gunnlaug Wormstongue. I really have to focus to be able to say that in English and not say Gunnlaug Ormstunge, which is his name in Norwegian. And both of those sagas are counted among the Icelandic sagas. I have all of the Icelandic sagas in this collected Norwegian translation. This is the first complete translation into Norwegian of all of the Icelandic sagas, and also the shorter format, which is called Þottr. I'm not sure what the English word for that is, but basically there are 40 sagas in here and then 43 Þottr, which, I mean, if you see a saga as a novel, a thought would be a short story. I love this edition. It was published in 2014 when I was in university doing Old Norse, and the editor of this collection was my teacher, and he talked about this, and I thought, I want it, and it was fairly expensive, so I put it on my Christmas wish list, and my parents got it for me, and I was so happy, and I have not read it since. So this is a perfect opportunity to actually get started on reading some of these books, because they are gorgeous. Both of the two sagas from the first 2 weeks are in the first edition of this, or the first volume. It collects the sagas about the bards and also about Greenland and Wineland, which is what the Vikings called America, North America. However, I do have a different edition of Saga om Gunnlaug Ormstunge, or the Saga of Gunnlaug Wormstongue, and it's this tiny thing, which is the edition that I studied in high school, because this is probably not one of the most well-known sagas out there in the world. I mean, you have like Njol Saga and Egil Saga that are probably the most well-known of all of the sagas. However, this is definitely the most well-known in Norway, simply because this is always the one that is taught in schools. Probably because it's one of the shorter ones, yet it still contains many of the very traditional parts of the saga, so it's well suited for educational purposes. So I also have this edition with my notes from high school, so I might take a peek in this as well. In the third week we will be reading King Harald saga, and that is not one of the Icelandic sagas, it's one of the King's sagas, which are just different groupings you may put the sagas into. And the most well-known collection of King's sagas is the one created by Snorri Sturlason, and it's known as Heimskringla. It was called Kringla Heimsins in the original, and in Norway it is mostly known as either Snorre's Kongesagaer, the King's Sagas of Snorri, or Norges Kongesagaer, which is the King's Sagas of Norway. I have this edition, which I have read several times already. It's published in 1997. It was an updated version. The language is sort of updated to a more modern form, but it looks kind of traditional. These illustrations have been part of the King Sagas of Snorri, the King Chronicles, I think it's called in English, for a long time. This is a book that is very important in Norway historically, because it deals with the Norwegian kings for a very long period of time, from like mythical times up until the very end. And in Norway this book had a particular position about a bit more than 100 years ago, because Norway gained its independence in 1905, and this was one of the books used to build a sense of national pride and national community after gaining independence from first Denmark, then Sweden, because this showed that Norway had a history as a sovereign nation with kings of their own. And the present day kings of Norway are numbered in relation to kings in this. When Norway became independent in 1905, we got a king who was a Danish prince, but he changed his name when moving to Norway to become king here to Håkon the 7th. And the first 6 Håkons can be found in this book. And that's a tradition that has continued to this day. Our present king is also called Harald, and he is also numbered in relation to all the Haralds in this book. So for the longest time in Norway, if you had 2 books in your house, they would be the Bible and it would be this one. And I still kind of I have more than 2 books in my house, but you can find both the Bible and this in my collection still. So this is the edition I will be reading, and this is the edition that I have read several times. However, I also have a different edition of this, and it's this one, the word Snorre written on the cover. This I inherited from my grandmother, and it's an edition from 1930. And as you can see, it still has the same style of illustration as the newer version, because these illustrations were made by famous Norwegian artists when this book was first put together in Norwegian. So these illustrations have a very tight connection with the text for most Norwegians. So they're kind of a unity, these lovely illustrations from the beginning of the nation building time in Norway. And I like them. They are pretty, and I really like this book and these texts. So I look forward to revisiting the saga of King Harald. And then the fourth and final week, we're going to be reading the Prose Edda, which is also called Snorre Edda, because it was written by the same Snorre Sturlason. And in Norwegian it's also called the Younger Edda, and the Poetic Edda is called the Older Edda. I have this as well in the Norwegian version. This combines both of the Eddas, both the Poetic and the Prose Edda, and I will be reading it here. I think the Edda is not technically a saga, but close enough, who cares. I also have another edition of this, which is this called Edda Dikt. This is just a Poetic Edda, but as you might or might not know, Norwegian is a language that has two written standards. One is called Nynorsk or New Norwegian, and the other is called Bokmål or book talk, book language. I have two editions because this is in Nynorsk and this is in Bokmål. And for now I'm going to be reading the Bokmål one just because that is my main language, but mostly because this has both the Eddas and the other has just a poetic one, and it's the Prose Edda that we will be reading. So those are the editions that I will be reading for Sagalong. Is this something you are interested in? Do you want to read some of the sagas, or have you read some of them before? Let me know in the comments, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.